Joining us now is a supporter of the original ban on the ban, David Tafuri, who's a foreign policy advisor to Barack Obama's campaign. This is something the president predicted. He was right. There was never a legal basis for this, correct?
President Trump won the legal argument today, and the Supreme Court came out on his side and lifted the stay that the appeals courts put in place. But the legal argument was never the strongest argument against the ban. It's the policy argument. This is really bad policy.
Before you elide over that, will you concede that there was a legal argument against it that the left as a group made, and it was that a single judge in Hawaii had more power over America's foreign policy and the control of America's borders than the president did, and the Supreme Court today said that's absurd?
It wasn't just Hawaii, Tucker. There were a number of court cases, a number of courts that stayed this travel order, and it was a close call legally. It was a close call for the appeals courts that upheld the stay. It was also a close call for the Supreme Court.
But the president's got a right to make judgments like this and enforce them with law. I mean, that's why we have a president. I mean, you will concede that.
I think that's a valid argument, and that's the argument that was made, and that's one of the arguments that persuaded the Supreme Court today. Although, keep in mind that the court only lifted the stay. It will hear the merits of the case in October. But yes, you're right. But as I said, the stronger argument against this travel ban is it's really bad policy. It doesn't accomplish the goal, which is to make America safer.
It doesn't. So I guess you would argue the counter case that the more immigrants we have from, say, Somalia coming into the country, the safer we are? I mean,
no, that's
what
not
is
what
the
I would
argument
argue.
that you're making?
What I would argue is that on policy grounds, this ban is both too broad and not broad enough. Let me explain. Here's why it's too broad. It denies Muslims from 6 predominantly Muslim countries. However, let me
stop and correct you. It makes no reference to religion at all. It doesn't ban Muslims. It bans people who live in 6 countries the Obama administration designated as chaotic and terror-prone.
But the 6 countries that it banned, the only thing that they have in common is they're majority Muslim countries.
No, the thing they have in common is the Obama administration said they were dangerous.
One of the reasons it's actually not broad enough because it doesn't ban terrorists from the countries where terrorists have actually come from who have killed Americans. Here's one thing that's
So are you
really
arguing? Hold on. Actually, let me just stop and agree with you. I think that's a fair point. I mean, 15 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 came from Saudi Arabia. So you're arguing that we should extend the ban and add more countries to it? Is that what you're arguing?
What I'm arguing is it's really bad policy because it doesn't protect America. There's a Cato Institute study, and Cato is not a liberal institution. It's a neutral institution.
Every night someone throws a Cato study.
But let me tell you, it's incredible what it found. It found between 1975 and 2015, not one American was killed by anyone from the 6 countries that were banned. But, however, more than 2,000 Americans were killed by terrorists from countries that were not banned,
so are
like
you,
Saudi Arabia.
I get that you don't. What are you arguing for? Are you saying that we should add Saudi Arabia and Jordan and Qatar to the ban?
What I'm saying is, if the purpose of this travel ban was to protect America, it's not working, and it's not going to work.
So why don't you tell me this?
Let me tell you what would work.
Tell me why.
Can I tell you what would work?
Tell me why. Let's just pick Somalia of the 6. Now, the central government of Somalia does not control the land within its borders. I mean, there's a new country that's popped up, Somaliland, in the middle of it. Somali passports are notoriously counterfeited. The government is flaky. There's been a continuous state of war for more than 20 years. How could the U.S. government feel confident that anybody coming from Somalia is being properly vetted?
Somalia is a good example. Somalia is a somewhat lawless place. It's a failed state. It's a place where we should be very, very wary about letting Somalians into America, and we should have extreme vetting for them. But what we should not do is ban all Somalians. As you may know, the U.S. has people inside Somalia. We have diplomats and soldiers inside Somalia fighting terrorists. They're working with Somalians. If they encounter Somalians who are good people, who are helping them, who are brave and putting their life on the line, and they can't have the option to put them through a refugee program so they can come back to America when they've helped America fight terrorists, it doesn't make sense. It's too broad.
You're just making this up on the spot.
No, I'm not making that up on the spot.
Then back it up.
I was in Iraq during the war.
I don't believe you worked with Somalis in Somalia. Let me ask you this. Tens of thousands of Somalis from Somalia have been resettled into the United States, and quite a number of them have been involved in terror plots and been arrested for it in the Minneapolis area. So what percentage of those Somalis relocated here once worked for the U.S. government fighting terrorism?
I don't know the answer to that.
Oh,
but my
none.
point is,
Oh,
but my
none,
point
probably.
is,
Okay.
we are
So your point is
banning.
actually not
But
a
my
real
point
point.
is, we are banning some of them,
Okay. We are.
and,
How many
and
would
we're
you
not
say?
banning people from countries that have actually produced terrorists who've killed Americans, which
Okay.
makes no. And by the way, we're also banning people from countries like Syria, where also we have American soldiers who are serving in harm's way. They have Syrians that are helping them, and they might want to put those Syrians through a refugee program because they risk their lives to help America.
Well,
it's too broad. We're banning grandmas and grandpas and 3-year-old kids.
You're trying to outshout me here. But you raised the specter of the U.S. government keeping the Montagnards out, or whatever group has fought with American soldiers abroad. But you can't name a single person from Somalia who has done that. There likely aren't very many. And that's really not the point at all. You're not for banning anybody. And you somehow think that an open borders policy will make the country safer. And I think most people just would disagree with that because it's demonstrably false.
Of course, I can name Somalians who have done that. I know Somalians who have helped Americans and then were granted refugee status, and they're good, law-abiding citizens here in America right now. Just like I know Iraqis, when I served in Iraq during the heart of the war, the height of the war, and there were Iraqis who risked their lives to help me and to help others who were serving the U.S. government, and we got them in the refugee program.
So is Iraq on this list? It's one of the 6 countries?
Iraq was on the first order, Iraq was on the first order, and that's one of the reasons why the second order is better than the first.
Here's what we
because
have
Iraq was
is a
taken
series of non sequiturs. Let's get to the bottom line here, which is the president puts this policy into place, which I don't think goes far enough, and you seem to agree with me. But he does
it both doesn't go far enough, and it goes too far.
You said so, but he does it. Why? He does it because Japan and China have, let's see, almost no terror attacks in Tokyo and Beijing because they don't have any people from these countries living there. London and Paris have a ton because they have the largest concentration of people from these places in the West. Normal people see a connection between those two facts. You don't.
But, Tucker, it wasn't tailored to protect us. Let me give you an example.
No, don't gloss it over.
Let me give you an analogy.
Are people from these countries more likely or less likely than people from, I don't know, China to set off suicide bombs?
Let me give you an analogy.
Let's be real.
Let's say you're a farmer. Let's say you have sheep. Sometimes your sheep get killed. Let's say thousands of your sheep have been killed by wolves. And let's say you decide you want to protect your sheep better. You build a fence to keep bears out, even though no bear has ever killed one of your sheep, and you let wolves in still. That's an analogous to what President Trump is doing.
We're out of time. I want you to look me straight in the face and say people from these 6 countries are as likely to commit acts of terror as people from Japan. Is that what you're saying?
No, that is absolutely not what I'm saying. But there are other countries where people come from those countries, and they're more likely to commit
Let's add
terrorist
them to the list.
than from
you
these
and I are in
6
agreement
countries.
on that. We'll expand the list. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
More Trump.